Welcome to Global Insider Talks. I am so pleased to be joined today by Matthew Sawyer. Matthew is an American business and marketing strategist and managing director of Rocket Market Development, where he helps companies find opportunities in the United States. He's also a professor at Columbia University and NYU in New York City, where he teaches graduate level business and marketing strategy courses. And the reason why I'm excited is Matthew recently published a book entitled Make It in America: How International Companies and Entrepreneurs Can Successfully Enter and Scale in U.S. Markets. And this is what we're going to be talking about today. Matthew, welcome.
Well, hello, Jeff. Thank you. And thank you for inviting me to speak with you and your audience.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for being here. And it was really a fantastic book. I've read it, I swear. I recommend you all get your own copy. In it, you'll find some really practical advice and tips for business owners that are outside of the U.S. trying to come into the U.S. market, which is no small feat. There's some great tools, and my favorite part of the book were all of these case studies that, Matthew, you included when you published this book. They give us examples of over 100 examples of how some companies were successful and some were not so successful, and we learned from these experiences. So I'm sure the viewers of this interview have a ton of questions, so let's get right into it. And I'll ask you, so if I've never operated my business in the United States before, what would you say are my top, say, 5 priorities to consider before coming to the U.S.?
Well, you really have to do your homework. You really have to see, where is the market? Where is the place that you want to enter? The U.S. is so huge. There's like tons of different markets within it. And so really finding that place. And it could be in terms of understanding the different legal environments, what are the opportunities. So that's number one, is in terms of deciding where you want to start. And then also doing homework in terms of, is there a need or a demand for this product, and all of the aspects of things that potentially could become obstacles for you.
So it's really about doing your homework before you try to leave your homeland to come to the U.S. And I might add, we advise our clients to make sure that data is really driving their decisions rather than gut instinct alone, because you could get here and end up wasting a lot of money and a lot of time to come.
Yeah, and partly it could be in terms of their aspect in terms of doing a pilot program, starting in one market and then expanding. There's one company that was featured in the book called Too Good to Go. And it was about a company that had an app that enabled people to buy food products and bakery goods and whatever before it was being thrown out at the end of the day. And they came into the US, they came to New York, they established themselves in New York, and then after from New York, then they went to other parts of the country. So that was a way of doing research in a way in a major scale, and then refining it for different markets.
It's a really interesting business there. And it plays on this whole idea of sustainability and not, with a lot of people, not having enough food on their table at night, to be able to use the food that's left over from the restaurants and businesses in New York and around the country. That's great. So Matthew, let's touch back on this idea that the United States, we might be one country, but we're 50 states. And we have, hundreds of counties and cities. So how, if I'm a foreign business owner coming to the U.S., how do I figure out how it works in the United States, in the particular region that I want to be? How do I figure that out? How do I make sure that the buying interests of the consumers in one part of the country, say California, are aligned with my business versus maybe somewhere in the middle of the country?
Well, the first step is to really recognize the fact that it isn't one big country. I spoke to over 150 people from 40 different countries. And I remember talking to someone from Australia who said that, well, I'm going to bring my product to the US rather than trying to go into to Europe, because it's just one big country. Everyone speaks the one language. And he couldn't be more wrong. So that's in terms of recognizing that there is all this diversity. That's the first step. Of course, then you have to do, your homework in terms of figuring it out, which is the best opportunity, and both in terms of doing, research, and also very much in terms of working with local talent, working with experts, whether it's consultants, whether it's bringing people on board. It's essential to do.
So I read in the book, a lot of companies decide to incorporate in Delaware because of their maybe more lenient tax policies. Talk to me a little bit about, sort of from a legal and a tax perspective, how do if I'm a foreign business owner, I'm not just automatically going to go to Delaware. How do I figure that out? What do I do?
Well, Delaware, it happens to be a very attractive place, particularly for companies that want to go public. So because everyone recognizes in terms of Delaware being very pro-business, and if you're going to be going public, doing an IPO, people are familiar with all of the legal aspects of it. So venture capital and some financial people won't even touch a company that isn't structured, that isn't formulated in Delaware. But if you're not going to be doing that, there's no real reason to go through that. There are other states that are more attractive, Nevada, for example, or New Hampshire, from a tax policy. So you have to be very strategic about which of those states that you do incorporate in.
So the bottom line is rely on local U.S. experts to help guide that decision for you.
Yeah.
Based on the industry that you're in, the products or the services that you're selling. Speaking of, so how about the strategy of, I have this product or service and I know that there's consumer demand in one part of the United States. And so in your book, you discuss one company that decided, I'm not going to go where I know that there's a known consumer population. I know that I can sell my product. I'm going to go to some other part of the United States where I know my product and service is going to sell because I did the homework, but there's no competition there. Talk to me a little bit about that. I know it goes back to the research.
Yeah, so that was a company. It was a Belgian company, Rensen, and that they manufactured a lot of building supplies and equipment. So one of the things that they had to do in terms of deciding, first they decided, well, which of those products that they're going to bring in. They had thousands of products, and they just concentrated on just doing their outdoor structures and things like that. Most of their competitors were on the East Coast, and they decided to go to Los Angeles to avoid that competition. Also because Los Angeles has a very large building. There's a lot of building going on, and the idea of having outdoor structures in a warmer climate just made a lot more sense for them.
That's great. So they're doing okay. They're still around.
Great. Actually, what they ended up doing after several years, they opened up a manufacturing facility in Texas, and they're growing tremendously.
That's great. Okay, I want to, before we close up here, I want to get to one other example that I think my favorite in the book, and it's this company. I think they're called Menk Fenster. They're a German window maker.
Yes.
What happened with them?
Yeah, so the word Fenster means means window in German. So that was a 130-year-old German company manufacturing high quality windows and outdoor doors and things like that. And so they decided in 2015 that they had some business in the US that they were going to go after and make a much bigger presence here. So they ended up getting money from the state of Massachusetts and a lot of tax incentives, and they opened up a factory in Western Massachusetts. And then with 2 years, they ended up closing it up and going back to Germany.
How come?
Well, the big reason, the book goes into a lot of it, but the big reason is they totally misread the market. For example, in Germany, in Europe, most of Europe uses twist and turn windows, where you turn it and then you twist it into the room. But here in the United States, we mostly use double hung windows that go up and down, or casement that go out. In addition, their windows were twice as expensive as they were in the US because they were highly energy efficient, which in the US, particularly in 2015, 2016, energy prices in the US were a lot lower than they are in Europe. So Americans weren't going to pay for that extra long time in terms of paying their investment. They also had problems in terms of getting the skilled labor, the skilled workers to manufacture the windows using their equipment.
Unbelievable. So, and it's worth saying that this was pre-COVID, right? Before COVID, they ended up closing up and going back to Germany.
Right.
I think, look, it could be, I mean, I think the lesson here is it could be as something as basic as something involved with your product itself that may
Right.
not allow you to sustain business in the United States. Okay, we're about out of time, Matthew, but any final words of advice for our viewers?
Well, I think we've talked a lot in terms of the scaring people off in terms of not wanting to, but I also wanted to talk about what the huge upside potential is. You know, the US, we have the largest, by far the largest economy, the most robust in terms of consumers and you know, our pro-business government. And, you know, it's a really, if you want to grow exponentially, the US is the place to do it.
Thank you, Matthew. I appreciate it. I'm glad we're ending on a positive note because it is a great place to do business with a lot of consumers here that are ready to spend their dollars. And so thank you very much for spending time with me this afternoon. And I invite you all to visit factumglobal.com for more information about our Global Insider Talks interview series and our services. And thank you for joining us.